Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Night Frights. Yes, this is something new that I am bringing to my channel because I love you guys. So, my spooky people, are you guys ready for this? Because guess what? I am bringing this to you every freaking Friday. So grab onto those titties or those dicks and let's go for a ride. Okay? Now, these stories may or may not be true. Okay? Some of them may be true. Maybe like 90%, okay? But I hope you enjoy this. This is going to happen every Friday. And thank you for always being so supportive. And yeah, this is a premiere right now. There might be other premieres. I don't know yet. We shall see how this one goes. Comment below and let me know what you think, because what you think is important to me. All right, here we go now. Bye-bye. Wait, no. Oh, hold on. You'll see me in the comments, okay? I'll see you. This story is called It Was Good to See an Old Friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road, flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with, Jim, not his name. Gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, no, just take me home. Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turnoff, he said, just drop me here. It was good to see you again, and he walks off into the night. I go to the VFW, get some of my own classmates. We start to talk. As we were talking about who is coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked up Jim up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes, white as a t-shirt. Barb, Jim died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral, I was told. I started to feel really dizzy and I went to the car to take some deep breath. There on the seat is a local newspaper printed 8 years previous containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Oh. You guys, okay, look, listen. This is some Pee Wee Herman shit right here, you know? What is it, Large Marge? Okay, as I was reading this, I was legitimately thinking about Large Marge. Okay, if you don't know that movie, you're too little to be in here. Go, leave. But, anyway, what a story. Next. This next story is called The Unrest Stop. I was driving across country with my mom and my sister when I was 16 and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested, still, and alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us with 2 young men standing still outside of it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us and the 2 men had not moved at all, not an inch. They weren't talking. They weren't on phones. They were just standing there, still as a stone. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, the 2 men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to fucking shit, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black. Not reflecting any light at all. Just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the whole experience, we couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, and we could not find it on Google Maps or any paper we had. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on that stretch of road and got only confused looks. Only confused looks. Jesus Christ, we get it together. We've traveled on that interstate since, and there is no rest stop. I was about to say, like, wait, what? Like, you... Okay, first of all, if I ever stopped somewhere in the middle of the night and I saw a van full of teenagers, 1, they're horny. 2, fuck no. Every horror movie that you've ever seen, doesn't the movie start with a fucking van full of idiot teenagers? Like, seriously? That's your first sign to get the fuck out of Dodge. Like, I'd be like, look, listen, mom. Listen, sister. Do you see that van right there? That's the beginning of a horror flick. We need to get the fuck out so we're not a part of that shit. I mean, am I wrong or am I right? This next story is called Home Alone, and I am going to read it as it's written, because Lord knows that people need to know proper grammar. Anyway, best friend's parents were out of town one weekend, and she had the house to herself. Went about her business having dinner, watching TV, then decided to go to bed. She was lying in her bed with her back to her closet when she heard the door open. She somehow pretended to be asleep. The man, who was hiding in the closet, walked around her bed to the side she was laying facing, gently stroked her hair and face, and then left. She immediately called her boyfriend to ask him to come over, then called her parents and then the police. Long story short, this man had been getting into their home through a doggy door. They didn't have a dog and didn't bother to secure it. And he'd been living in a tent in the foresty area behind their home for months to creep on her. They found a ton of surveillance footage of her sleeping and pieces of her clothes and stuff. And that's the story. So, how thin? Is this like fucking Slender Man or something? How thin is this dude that he fit through the dog door? Like, what? You know, I mean, I'd be more worried about that dude's health. Like, hey, bro, like, are you all right? Like, you fit through that dog door. Like, my kid barely fits through that shit. You know what I'm saying? Look, I know it's supposed to be scary, but come on. In our reality, are you okay, sir? You know, what the hell? This next story is called Party Invite. A guy I was good friends with had a party one night and called me to invite me over. It was me and my wife's first day off together in a while, and our daughter was 2 years old. I mentioned it to my wife, and my daughter said, "No, don't go, Daddy." Of course, I can't resist, so I stayed home, and we had a good night. My friend, however, had the worst night of his life. His party was going good, and everything was fine, even though there was a friend of a friend there who no one really knew. Turns out, the stranger had been smoking PCP and decided to start killing people. He took a butcher knife and slashed 3 people's throats. My friend's wife threw their kids out of a 2-story window and jumped out herself, took them into the woods, and called the police. All 3 people died. The police found the guy walking down the side of the road, covered in blood and incoherent. He had no idea what he just did. Wow. Can you imagine going to a party and, like, someone's just on PCP and shit, or LSD, or some type of, you know, drug, and they just start killing people? Like, what the like, excuse me, do you know how much these Doritos and all this salsa cost? God damn it. Like, okay, look, listen, in our reality, like, yeah, that's kind of, you know, back then, you know, people would just be like, hey, you know, so-and-so's having a party, and then you would go, and, you know, you'd have fun and stuff. But this is what happens when things go wrong and you invite the wrong people, like someone you don't know. And it is pretty scary, you know what I'm saying? But again, like, I spent all this money on all this beer and shit for you to be stabbing people and crap. Like, what the hell? What the hell? Now, this next story is actually really crazy, okay? It's called Shasta Groen. The murder of the Groen family. A deranged pedo named Joseph Edward Duncan was already on the run from the cops for a past sexual assault. He was incredibly charming and manipulative and was truly pure evil. He camped outside a family's rural home unseen by them. He picked it out after driving past it and seeing children's toys outside. He watched them from afar, got to know the routine with the intent of kidnapping the children, 10-year-old Dylan, 8-year-old Shasta. Jed found the lock on the door was broken, entered the home in the middle of the night, and tied up the mom, dad, and teenage son. He put Shasta and Dylan in his car and killed the rest of the family with a hammer. He traveled around various campsites and cabins with Shasta and Dylan captive, sexually abusing, torturing, and raping them. He eventually shot Dylan, but Shasta talked him out of killing her. Jed ended up telling her she taught him how to love. The scariest part is a CCTV footage of Jed and Shasta at a gas station, because you could easily believe that they were just a normal dad and a grumpy daughter if you were an onlooker. Eventually, he took her to a diner where he was finally apprehended when a witness, or actually a waitress, noticed something was up, and Shasta was saved after 7 weeks in his clutches. As he was dragged away, he called to her, "Promise me you'll visit me in prison." And she said she would. I don't know if she ever did. Jed was put on death row and found to be guilty of 3 previous child murders. He died a few months ago from cancer. But the worst part of it all is how horrible Shasta's life has been afterwards. Drug addiction, in and out of jail, losing her children, etc. Just the most horrifying story ever. Now, I remember telling you guys about this story. This was going to be a part of my true crime stories that I was going to tell in the future, which I still am, but it's one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard in my life. And it's just really sad that she grew up to be like the person that she was, like a drug addict and all this other shit, right? I don't know why the story was in here, but fuck it, whatever. I read it, but I do want to make a true crime episode on this because there's way more to this story, So this next story is called The Worst Visit to the Eye Doctor Ever. I'm an eye doctor, and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it, and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down. That gross trick some kids do with their upper eyelids. It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick, gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess. It was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva, and within 2 days, the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. Excuse me, sir, can you post them? Because I want to post them on here. Ew. Is it larva or larvae? No, it's larva. Yeah, it's larva, my bad. But anyway, can you imagine, you're just walking and, you get hit in the eye with a fly, by a fly? Usually, at night, if I'm walking, I do sometimes get hit in the face with, bugs and shit. But can you imagine one of them, as it hits your face, its pregnant ass lays its eggs in your eyeball and you don't even know it, and then a couple days later your eye's hurting and then turns out you got bugs in your eye. What the fudge? Yeah, no, this is what you do. This is why you go to the doctor. You know what I'm saying? You gotta go get them checkups. You never know, you might have some shit growing in your eye. I've heard of people's eyelashes getting stuck in there too, and it's so gross. It's disgusting. Disgusting, I tell ya. This next story is called The Smell. Now, if you're eating something right now, I would highly suggest... God damn it, Ruby. Can you speak tonight? I would highly suggest you put it to the side. And if you have a cat... I guess, but if you have a cat, you don't have to do anything. But, just watch your back. Alright, so anyway, when I was younger, me and my twin brother would help our friend do his paper route. One summer, we could smell something gross coming from one of the houses. We all didn't think anything of it until 3 days later when the smell was reaching down the driveway. We went to the back door where he normally dropped the paper and noticed it was open. We went in and looked around the house and found the owner dead. He had died of a heart attack and his cats were eating him alive. Alive? You mean dead? I mean, he's dead, so they were just eating him. Anyway, yeah, so I've heard that if you die, your pets will eat you. Yeah, that's crazy, right? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I look at Batman, right? And sometimes I stare at him and I'm like, would you fucking eat me, you asshole, if I die? What if I die, would you fucking eat me? And he just looks at me like he knows what I'm saying, and like he like looks to the side like or Evie, I'm like, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, I don't know why this one is kind of funny and fucked up at the same time, but don't judge me. This one's called Tiger Attack. Okay. I'm not sure what the entire story is, but there was a body discovered somewhere in Siberia. His cause of death was freezing, but something was off. Turns out he had been attacked by a tiger. The tiger used his jaws and grabbed the guy by his backpack, picked him up over his head, and slammed him so hard that it snapped both of his femurs. Poor dude lived 3 days after the attack, crawling around in the snow. Talk about fucking bad luck, right? Like, shit, not only did your ass get attacked by a motherfucking tiger, okay, but both of your femurs broke, so you can't walk. The fucking tiger didn't even eat you. He left. He was like, all right, my job's done. And then you were alive for 3 days and then died because it was fucking cold. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, that is the worst luck. I'm sorry, but that is the worst luck. Alright guys, this next story is really messed up. So, this one is called A New Life. A woman I worked with a few years ago told me how her life had changed drastically. She went from having a decent job to becoming an alcoholic and working as a cleaner. She had planned to move to Spain with her husband and young daughter and had a great job lined up out there. The plan was her husband and daughter would fly over first and she would fly over a week or two later due to finishing her old job a little later than planned. Her husband rang her on the day he arrived and said the house was lovely and the furniture had arrived by ferry, etc. That was the last time she ever heard from him. Her husband and daughter was found dead by authorities a few days after she rang, explaining she was concerned for their welfare. She had no contact with them and she was extremely worried. It was carbon monoxide poisoning. It is so scary to think how fast your life can change. Wow. Yeah, that sucks. So nowadays they have like the carbon monoxide, what is it? They kind of look like those fire alarms that are annoying when like the batteries are going out. And it can tell whether or not there's, carbon monoxide in there. So luckily we have that now, but that's sad that this woman, lost her family due to that. And it's actually a common thing, so thank God for technology, All right, guys, this one's kind of funny. This one is called The Creepy Chairman. There was a guy in my town who stalked women at the furniture store. He would watch women pick out new chairs and he would just linger there and drop these strange comments like, "That chair would look nice in my den." Then one night he followed one of the women home. He sneaked into their living room and then he would wait for them to enter the room. He'd then jump out and surprise them and he'd yell, "I knew you took my chair!" And he'd scream and chase them. This happened over the course of 5 years. The local police never did anything because he was brothers with the sheriff. Women couldn't buy furniture by themselves. They had to start bringing chaperones. Excuse me, what year was this? So I can't even. Okay, so he would jump out and surprise them. Like, did he think he owned the store and owned every piece of furniture? Like, he would jump and he'd be like, "I knew you took my chair." Like, what the fuck? I'd be like, listen here, John. Like, you're old as shit. Okay, this is my chick. Get the fuck out of my house. Like, come on now. These women were scared of this little old man. Wait, is it an old man? Oh, no, it was a guy. It was a young guy. Okay, never mind. Well, I mean, I thought I would assume it was an old dude. Like, what, like, young man or, I guess middle-aged man. I don't know. What person does that shit? Like, unless they're crazy, I would assume it was an old man, but I guess it wasn't. So I guess I would understand why they were scared now. I was like, if it was an old man, just get a bat and just beat the shit out of him, like, get the fuck out of my house. But anyway, all right, guys, this next story is crazy. Okay, this one is called Missing Child Found in Her Bed. I read a story recently about Paulette Gerbera Farah, a 4-year-old child who went missing from her room in 2010. Her parents immediately notified authorities and started a social media campaign to find Paulette. Paulette's room was searched multiple times and used by her parents to do media interviews. Here's the terrifying part, Paulette was found dead 10 days later in her bed. She had wedged herself between the mattress and the footboard and suffocated. Wow. So, I mean, damn, that is crazy, right? Like, they were doing interviews in that room. They searched the room, but they never thought about looking in that spot. Like behind her bed, right? Like between the mattress and the footboard. I mean, little kids can get stuck in little tiny spaces. So that is pretty crazy. Like, when I just read this, I was like, excuse me? Like, what? Listen, I feel like every story I'm reading now is just getting crazier and crazier. So this one is called Allison Botha. Allison Botha, on December 18, 1994, Port Elizabeth resident Allison Botha was abducted, raped, stabbed, and left for dead by Franz Dutoit and Thias Gruger. What kind of fucking names are those? They slashed her throat 17 times, so deep she had to hold her own head on as she crawled to the road for help. With her other hand, she had to hold in the organ spilling from her stomach, where she had been stabbed more than 30 times. By some miracle, the knife thrusts had missed her main arteries, so she did not bleed to death and was able to breathe through her severed trachea. There is a documentary that is on Amazon Prime called Allison, Satisfied Human? The hell? But yeah, anyway, isn't that, like, what the hell? I've heard stories of people who have been through very traumatic events, and have lived through them. So there's this one story, and this, okay, on our way to Las Vegas, I put on Mr. Ballin, which, if you guys don't know who Mr. Ballin is, he's ballin', okay? I'm just kidding. He's a really good storyteller, and he actually has motivated me to do stories like this. But anyway, he was doing a story on a woman who... Well, actually, she wasn't even a woman. She was a teenager. She was a girl. And she met up with her adult boyfriend, okay? And I'm not sure what happened or why, but they met up in his car. And I don't know if it was because she was pregnant. I think she told him that she was pregnant and, he was scared. And he ended up wrapping his belt around her neck. And he pulled it really tight to the point that it ripped. I mean, belts are very thick, okay, for one. So for him to have ripped his belt as he's strangling his girlfriend, I mean, can you imagine how tight that, like, what the hell? And apparently he thought she was dead, and her neck was, holy shit. He threw her in the forest, and it rained. And I think they somehow found out it was him, evidence. And they couldn't find her because it was raining. So, I think the following day, it was still raining, but they did a search for her at night. And they found her, and she was alive. She was alive, and she's still alive to this day. So, yeah, I feel like some people are just really, really strong-minded. There's another one of this woman who was hitchhiking. And I think she was 15 years old. She was hitchhiking, and she was with a group of people. And this car, pulls up, and it's a man. It's an older man. And he says, "Oh, you need a ride?" And she says, "Yes." And when the other people start getting into his van, because he had a van or something. He had like a big car, van, something. He was like, "No, I just want her to come." Which one? That's a red flag already. Like, why do you just want this one person to come with you, but not the other people? Like, if you're stopping to give this person a ride, why can't you give those other people a ride? So anyway, she gets in the car, and, she doesn't think anything of it, because she's been hitchhiking before, right? She's done it before. And she falls asleep, and when she wakes up, she realizes that they're going the wrong way, and she starts freaking out. And then, he kind of calms her down and says, "My bad. I'm old, and I don't know where I'm going." So he turns around and he starts going the direction he should be going. And then he goes into like this, like, rural off-road place. And oh my gosh, like, the story, I mean, I feel like I have to do a whole story on this, because holy shit, the events that happen in this story, and it happened in real life, man. Like, it's very, very upsetting. And so anyway, he pulls over to go pee, and as he's pulled over, she had already in her mind that she was going to run away, because she thought this was weird, he's creepy, and her shoes were untied. So she got outside, and she was tying her shoes, and then she gets hit in the back of her head with a hatchet. And then he proceeds to rape her several times. And as she's begging for her life, she's telling him, "Please let me go," she's holding on to him as she's saying this, and he brings down the hatchet onto her arm. Onto her arm, and he cuts her arm off as she's holding him. And she says that as she was falling back, she just didn't understand why she was falling back, because she remembers holding on to him. And then when she comes to, right, she looks at him, she notices that her arm is still grabbing onto him, and he's trying to get her arm off of him. But he continues to, oh God, he just continues to make her life a living hell, because he ends up cutting her other arm off too. So now she's armless, okay? And then he starts beating the shit out of her and throws her in a sewer hole. It's not a sewer hole. Sometimes you see these big water, I forgot what they're called, but they're they're tubes underground, and you can see them, water goes through them when it rains. He put her in there, and he thought she was going to die. She was going to bleed to death. But she ended up living. She ended up putting mud that was on the ground, because it had rained, on her wounds. And she covered her wounds up enough for the bleeding to stop. And then she walked up a hill for hours. She walked up, can you imagine, walking up a hill after all that with no arms? Yeah, so she did that, and she flagged, or I say flagged down, but she kind of did, she was screaming and stuff. The only way she could was, I guess, by moving her feet or something. I don't know. A car, and the first one passed by, didn't help her. The second one did, and then they were just in disbelief, because they were like, "Oh my God, what, how are you alive?" She had been beat, raped, her arms were cut off, and she was left for dead at the bottom of a hill of all places, right? They ended up catching the guy, and he was put in jail for some time. He got out because he worked or something. Some shit happened. He got out, and he ended up killing someone else, which is sad. But then he went back to jail or prison, and then I think he died. I don't know. It's a whole thing, but it's really crazy, right? How it's some people are just survivors. Some people can survive that, and I think it's just the will of living, and how strong they are, and how mentally they will try or do anything to live. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. But anyway, that is it. That is it for today. or tonight at least. It's Friday. If you liked the way that I'm doing this, please let me know in the comments. I'm going to try to do some like more music, more videos, like little cut scenes and stuff. Just because it'll make it more interesting. Right now I'm just doing like background work, clay work, diamond painting, whatever. Just it's more, think of it more of a podcast, right? And eventually I'll start adding pictures and stuff like that. But this actually turned out to be more of like a spooky story, true crime kind of thing. So hopefully I find more stories. And so anyway, give this video a like. Subscribe if you have not. And please comment below. When you comment below, it makes me happy. I love you guys. And I will see you guys tomorrow on Saturday. Because I go live on Saturdays now. All right. Toodaloo.